All right, I'm going to get my timer going because I really think the conversation is more fun than the presentation. So I'm going to go a little fast, but I think we'll be able to catch up. So I think Chuck asked me to present and say, show what's going on. What are we really doing out there? And I think because I'm going to go pretty fast, I'll give my take-homes up front. It's possible, it's working, we're doing it now, just go do it. You just got to start doing it. Stop talking about it. It really is possible. And I want to recognize Rich Platt. I know many of you know Rich. He's really a thought leader here, and we cycle through these. We share all our slides, and hopefully they get better over time. So this is just a list of some networks. These just happen to be networks that we're personally involved in. They're likely, if you really wanted to think about it, there's probably 100 of them. These are distributed networks focused on doing research. This is the learning healthcare system. The CDC started the Vaccine Safety Data Link in 1990. Still going on. It started as a central database, now it's distributed. NIH has a bunch. All of those actually sit within the HMO research network, which some of you probably know about. ARC's funding several different distributed research networks, typically focused on a topic, but it's exactly what we're trying to do here. FDA has, there's 2 here. I know of probably 3 or 4 others that FDA is funding, all distributed networks, sometimes with the same partners. That's just the way the federal government goes. I'll talk about the Mini Sentinel one. And the last one, ONC, and ONC obviously is funding more than just this. This is the one that we're running in Massachusetts. Mentioning it, because I just think it's a little different than the others. We're giving the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts the ability to query medical group practices. We're starting with two pretty big medical group practices. So someone at the department can log in, say, what's my influenza-like illness look like this week? Query, result back. It's now in staging. It will work. I'm sure it will work, and they'll be able to do that in the next couple months. So the future's now. So distributed model principles, we hit these. I think I just want to make one point here that we were talking about in our new core value, I think, is sending questions to the data is what we're describing. Do we have any responsibility to ensure the answer means anything? I'm just going to leave it out there. It's something that has to be discussed. The other core values, I think in the interest of time, these map to what we talked about. I mean, these are there. I'm mentioning these because these are really the principles that we use to build those other networks on the prior slide. They map exactly to the principles that we described this morning. It makes perfect sense where we were going. I always have to bring up data quality as a topic. So Guillain-Barré syndrome and pregnancy. I don't think there's a relationship. I can guarantee you I can find that relationship in the data. Why? We've seen it. We've seen a clinician write GBS, they meant group B strep. Someone in the translation looked up GBS and put the code in for Guillain-Barré syndrome. So we found it, but because of the way we designed our networks, which is the data stays with the partners, we figured it out, and it didn't take more than a couple days. GBS is easy because you shouldn't see very much of it, and when you start to see a big cluster of it, it was in one clinic at one place, and there's a cluster of GBS. You know it's not true, and this is how we figured it out. I mean, but because the data stayed with the partners, we could call and say, what's going on? And they actually just went into their EHR and said, oh yeah, sorry. But but that ability to go back to the data was incredibly important. And there's hundreds of these examples, and I won't go through anymore. But I think what I want to make sure, I sometimes come off as describing a bunch of data problems and then say, yeah, it's really hard to use, we shouldn't use it. We have to use the data. And you just have to figure out how to use it well. And you will make mistakes. That means I'm on the edge, so I like that. But we have a responsibility to use the data, and they can be used well. It's hard to use it well, and you have to be thoughtful. But we can't just wait until they're perfect. It's not going to happen. So how do you implement these networks? it's really, turns out it's really not that complicated. This slide probably used to say governance, 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 governance. It's all about the governance. It's all about the data partners. But you figure out what you're doing. This is how we've been creating these networks. And some of these will bleed over into what we should be doing in the learning healthcare system. But governance, develop some policies. We always have a coordinating center. So your choice. Define the data elements. There are thousands, tens of thousands data elements in EHRs. You don't need them all. In fact, the example I'll show you, our data dictionary probably has 100 variables, and we probably use 50. And that's all we want. So don't go and map all 20,000 tables in your Epic EHR. It's just not necessary. And adopt a querying approach. That's actually the most complicated piece. I'm not going to go much into it now, but it's important to how are you going to get at that information. The evolution of networks, the take home here is we started very much hand cranked. They're still mostly hand cranked. The newer networks are using a lot more software tools to enable the querying. So first it's think about the data, then think about how to get at the data. So we started to do a pretty good job at standardizing the data. Now we're trying to figure out how to easily get at it. And I'll show you that as an example for our FDA Mini Sentinel project. So Mini Sentinel, there's a website. You can go see what FDA Mini Sentinel is. For those of you who don't know, it's a medical product safety surveillance system funded by the FDA. The contract sits at Harvard Pilgrim. We've got 33 partner organizations. Very much a partnership and a collaboration, and we've got 17 data partners. Those are the ones circled. Those 17 data partners have about 126 million covered lives in there. These are insurers. Think insurance. The point of the slide is a lot of data, right? It's not a central warehouse. It's 17 partners. The data all sit behind their firewalls, and we can query it. Billions of stuff, right? It's just big. Billions of encounters and dispensings. We're adding lab values now, and don't get me started with labs. They're incredibly complicated to deal with. So how do we do this? FDA calls. This is FDA's network. They call, say, I'd like to know this. So they issue a query to us on the operations center, and we basically send it out to our partners. They pull it through their firewall. They can look at the query if they want. They execute the query. They can look at the results, and then they push it back out to us. So for the IT guys, it's a publish and subscribe model. We don't push anything in their firewalls. They always pull it through. I'll skip this one. This is just a more technical piece of that. This is I promise that it's really working. So one, my login is going to expire in a couple days. But this is last week. You don't need to see the details here, but we really do have a secure web portal. We can log in, we can issue queries, and we can respond. And on May 8th, one of our partners was responding to queries. And we've done hundreds of these in Mini Sentinel. So this is my rapid, my time good?
Yep. Cool. 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
And this is an example of a rapid response query. So this will be great. So July 4th last year was on a Monday, and we were all celebrating July 4th and not at work. But on Tuesday morning, FDA called and said, we kind of think we want to use Mini Sentinel to ask a question. And we were very excited because it was really the first time they were doing this. So first time we were really going to be able to test the system. So we discussed with them what they really wanted. The next day at 4 o'clock, they finalized the specifications of the query. Now, there's a lot of detail in here. There's not that many decisions they have to make. They have to pick the drug, pick the outcome, pick the comparator, and pick a couple definitions of incidents and other things. But they finalized the specs. We sent it out 2 hours later to 17 data partners, and on Friday morning, Rich Platt actually was in. We did this a little bit because he was meeting with Janet Woodcock on Friday morning at 9, so we kind of wanted it to be very impressive. So we showed up with a report, but we did. We showed up with a report. It wasn't the complete report. It was 13 results from 13 of the 17 data partners on Friday morning. We were pretty pleased with ourselves. The final report was done a week after. So the final report was done on July 12th. So a week after FDA asked, we were able to generate information that they found useful. To do that a year ago would have taken 9 or 12 months. I promise you, because we used to get those questions, and I used to laugh and say, yeah, I need a scope of work, and I need to find a programmer, and what do you really mean? And we had to test the code. Easy, 9 months. Now we were able to do it in a week. We pushed ourselves to do it in a week. We now, routinely, the response is about 2 or 3 weeks for these kinds of things, if they're not emergencies. And here we said, emergency, we really want to do it. It was only kind of sort of an emergency. We were trying to push to see if we could get it done. So I get to have my vision of multiple network sharing infrastructure. So let's just pretend there's a learning healthcare system and there's that many organizations involved. Mini-Sentinel looks something like this. It's some group of organizations that are part of the Mini-Sentinel network. They will abide by the governance of that network, et cetera, et cetera. But you can have a CDC network. Not a problem. The key is you don't want each of the partners to change the data for each of these networks. You want it to be the same data source, the same querying infrastructure, different governance. That's just fine. Harvard Pilgrim's part of 10 or 11 or 12 networks, different governance. But that's just fine. In fact, the software we've been building allows you to do this even more easily. You could have an NIH network. Not a problem. Deal with the data, then deal with the querying. I had to put this in here because this will come up. It's once you build this infrastructure, a lot of people are going to want access to it. So FDA built this Mini-Sentinel infrastructure, and we get a lot of questions like, well, can I do comparative effectiveness research from ARC or PCORI or somewhere else? And we've got pharma wanting, and others want to come and use the network. Someone's got to deal with that governance. That's a governance question. It's possible, it's completely possible. I wouldn't put it through FDA. I would make another network that uses the same data. So the key is each organization choosing to participate. You can choose multiple networks. The networks control the governance. I think this maps to what we were in the learning healthcare system piece, or our documentation, as initiatives. In the back, we were calling these initiatives, right? FDA is an initiative. The initiative controls whatever governance it's going to have. And then I think the key, my take home, is really that you have to be able to share the infrastructure. Data curation, I like the concept of data curation. It matters. You can share the analytics, share the lessons learned, the software development, share that, and then lay initiatives on top of it. And it works, and it works now. And I'd really caution against trying to make it perfect. Because I think the reason we were able to build this is because FDA said it's got to work on a date. So I couldn't wait for the perfect data model or for HL7 to finish up, right? So that was a good excuse. So I just kept going. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.